useful information, and there's a lot of ideas. So I hope I don't bore you, but we're going to do a little story time with Chef Jerry, and talk and compare a little bit about stocks, and then we'll open up for some discussion a little bit later, and you know, have a little bit of fun with it. But since I found it really, I don't know, poetic, I don't know. I found that there were a lot of topics that we could address by talking about stocks as a fundamental. So this is page 43 in the book, and here we go. So stock is the most important liquid base used in the preparation of many dishes such as soups, sauces, stews, and braisings. Now, I'm going to stop and interject because I obviously, my mind was going crazy when I was rereading this. And, you know, it's so relevant, I think, to look back and touch back on the starting point, because so often I find that in our careers, we stray from where we had originally started. And it always helps to, you know, reignite and re-spark the, you know, where we are versus where we started. All right. When correctly made from good quality, fresh ingredients in the correct proportions, good stock can only enhance the quality of the dish with which it was used. If badly made or stale stock is used, it can ruin the dish. The constant simmering for days on end with the continuous addition of dubious ingredients results in an indefinable, overcooked, cloudy, and tasteless stock, which should have no place in the kitchen. It's also, you can't reproduce it. And, you know, I think one of the largest challenges that food programs experience is consistency. You know, this is why I spent quite a bit of time talking about recipes. And, you know, when we talk about fundamentals, it's easy to lose sight of the fact that, you know, it wasn't just a mishmash of partially good ingredients, always different, that went into these foundation, you know, ingredients or these foundational preparations that determined the destiny for so many other things after it. You know, so in preparation of stocks, which require bones, these should be as meaty as possible in some sort, if some sort of body and flavor is to be imparted. So again, right here, I think that's another component that we miss. I know I was taught, and we're right here, right? You know, I was taught that meat equals broth, bones equals stock, and I get that, and I think that makes perfect sense. But I know that, you know, good butchery requires you to have clean bones, but having a little bit of meat on your bones helps. Now, the addition of tougher meats like shin or beef, old fowl, hocks of ham, unsmoked, or just cured bacon, those can be more justified, especially now when, you know, when butchery should be good, the bones should be clean. And it's also important to have a flavorful stock. If you're spending the money to make stock, spend the money to make good stock. It should be remembered that these meats can be removed when cooked and used later for other dishes, right? It is essential that the ingredients and flavorings used take account of the ultimate use of the stock. Again, basic conversation, but something that I think, you know, people still miss. You know, I talk to, you know, I talk to so many people who have made stock, or have had cooks work for me that have made stock that was, quote unquote, like a master stock. It was pork and chicken and veal trim. And that's really hard to work with, especially in our environment nowadays where, you know, people are so sensitive to any one particular ingredient, and, you know, it makes for an additional discussion or another challenge. The same flavorings and their proportions can never be equally suitable for all stocks. They should be capable of defining and accentuating the particular qualities of a dish where they are used to deglaze a cooking pan or use as a lightly buttered glaze. Stock cubes and proprietary essences are useful in an emergency when there is a temporary shortage of stock, but in general, these are not suitable for large-scale use since they can produce a stock which, being already seasoned, is against the rules regarding the use of stock. Stock being, you know, a building block for everything else. So we're going to skip ahead right down here to care should be taken in the preparation of stock as follows. And I flipped to this page and I was like, well, this is why we're going to talk about stock right here. So points that I think need to be reiterated and points that are very relevant for anybody that you're teaching. And I think it's relevant for us as chefs in our everyday, right? One, it's just about the pot, right? You know, for preference, a stock pot with a bottom emptying tap makes sense. It could go either way. Two, use fresh ingredients of good quality and always in the right proportions to give stocks of reproducible quality and taste. And this is why I think with fundamentals, you need to talk about discipline, recipe consistency, and, you know, like we talked about in the ingredients module, quality ingredients. You're never going to be better than bad ingredients. You can't be any better than the ingredients that you start with. 3, break meat and bones small so that the maximum amount of flavor can be extracted and imparted into the stock. Now, I want to pause on this one for a second and talk specifically as this relates to developing flavor in the amount of time that you have. Now, something that commonly steers people in the wrong direction when they're taking the Master Chef exam is not breaking down the bones as small as they should, right? If something's bigger than an inch by an inch, right, you're not going to extract the amount of flavor that you need or that you could in a 3-hour period of time, right? So that's why you need to get things quite a bit smaller in order to extract that flavor. If you have 6 or 7 hours to simmer whole chicken carcasses, that's a different story. But if you have 2 or 3 hours, one of the most effective ways to get the maximum amount of extraction is to reduce the size of those bones. And if you're making a brown stock, or if you're trying to develop flavor, or you're making a passage or something like that, you will be able to get much more caramelization on smaller cubes than on big chunks, right? So you get more Maillard reaction, you can impart deeper flavor into a sauce or a stock that will eventually become a sauce or a building block. The marrow of any beef shin bone should be removed and reserved for any other uses. Number 4, I think this is something that definitely gets overlooked. If any meats are used, these should be tied so they can be easily removed when cooked. And this is the same reason why I would put, you know, bay leaves, peppercorns, thyme. This is why I would use a sachet. And I know I don't know how all of you cook, but I know that I've had sous chefs come to me to cook for a position, and they're doing a braise, and they put a handful of whole peppercorns into the braise, and they put a handful of bay leaves into the braise. And I understand, I appreciate the fact that there are peppercorns and bay leaves now in the braise. But what I don't appreciate is when I bite into that braise after it's cooked, cooled, sliced, and ready to eat, I'm going to bite into a peppercorn, and I'm going to have to deal with a bay leaf. Or as a cook, I'm going to have to clean all that up because chef's going to say something about that. You're making a bigger mess. And so, you know, being thoughtful of the other side, the whole process and all the way through, is our responsibilities as the chefs, as the leaders, as the directors of our culinary teams. 5, the stock should be brought to the boil slowly as to leach out the clarifying qualities of the blood contained in any meats. Okay, I think that makes perfect sense. And I don't think that's too terribly different from anything that's out there, but it's definitely a key point for quality stock. As the stock comes to a boil, remove the fat and scum as it rises to the surface, then skim irregularly. If you don't skim regularly, the stock's going to become cloudy and dirty in appearance and taste. right? Just worth a review. The stock should be allowed to simmer gently. Obviously, if it's boiled, you run into cloudiness issues, you run into evaporation issues, and then that becomes a yield conversation. I always found that stock and the caring for stock was a good task to help a sous chef or a cook learn the nurturing skills that are required for harder processes in cooking. So I always, I'm always very deliberate as to who I give these projects to. And I try and have that conversation. And I find I get a different engagement from my students, apprentices, sous chefs, whoever it be, when I address it that way and talk to them about, the nurturing of the stock and the care that needs to go into it. And, I really try and play up the importance of whatever project it is. And I definitely have always seen a positive outcome from my team. It is essential that all stocks be cooked for approximately the required amount of time only. This is a conversation I've had some fairly challenging conversations with. You can overcook a stock, and I am 100% confident that you can overcook a stock. You can undercook a stock. And I think that what most people are taught is that a properly cooked stock is simmered until whenever somebody decides to pull it off of the stove, right? And that's the world we live in. At least that's the world that I've seen, and that those are the cooks that I've worked with, and those are the apprentices that I've had. And I've had some pretty great apprentices or externs from, really well-renowned establishments. But that discipline is something that needs to get programmed into a young culinarian as early as possible. It's not when you're ready, it's when the food's ready. And you can see the benefits that will play in everything that they do if they start to understand that their schedule needs to revolve around the doneness of the food. As a general rule, only very little salt should be added. I'm actually a no salt in my stock kind of person. But again, it's all in what you do. And it's all in, how you want your stock treated at your operation. I'd never heard to add eggshells. If we just kind of skim through these real quick, I was kind of surprised to see that. I think this is really useful. I think in the day and age that we're in, with margins getting smaller and smaller, with dining room occupancies getting smaller and smaller, learning or remembering, I guess is the right way to say it, remembering or reminding the next generation that the fat can be skimmed from the stock and you can use that for cooking is powerful. I love cooking with chicken fat. I love cooking with lamb fat. I mean, I like cooking lamb with lamb fat, of course, but, cooking meats in the fats that, that came from them is a really cool way to develop flavor. And with butter hitting close to I think I saw $4.30 something a pound for, a good quality butter, and that sucks. If you're getting free fat and you can save $5 a pound, maybe it's not even saving. You're using a different fat. You're doing something different with the food. Just a thought process. And that kind of ties into that Garmager philosophy of how can you utilize your leftovers to make money? I've never been one to think that stock should be made on a daily basis. I'm a weekly or bi-weekly. I freeze my stock. And then with blast chillers, this was obviously, this book was written so the first edition was published in 1972. So obviously there's been quite a bit technologically that's changed. I think the principles, just like with anything, I think the principles are still valuable and solid, but definitely you have to apply new technology. And we're actually going to touch on that in a second here when we get to our next book. And then cool the stock quickly, right?